Hola clase, ¿cómo están ustedes? Hoy vamos a hacer capítulo uno, vocabulario. So today we're going to do chapter 1, vocabulario. And remember, it takes more than once for you to memorize something. So if you remember from my lesson, tips for learning a world language, how many times do you have to see and hear something before your brain memorizes it? Siete, 7. And if you're anything like me, I need 15 times. And so as you move forward with learning this vocabulary, remember repetition, exposing yourself to the language frequently through music and podcasts, flashcards, all of those things, all of those habits are going to make it a lot easier for you to remember this vocabulario. So you need to see something and hear something 7 times before your brain memorizes it. Before we get into the vocabulario, vamos a hacer poquito con la cultura. So we're just going to do a little bit with culture. So what I want you to do is brainstorm all the different foods you've eaten from Spanish-speaking countries. And so what Latin dishes have you had? And I just want to clarify that Spanish food is not the same as Mexican food. Mexican food is not the same as Cuban food. Cuban food is not the same as Peruvian food. So there are a lot of Latin dishes. And which ones have you tried? And I just really like to have this conversation because when I was brought up in the 90s as a teenager, Taco Tuesday did not exist. The consumption of Latin food, Mexican food has increased drastically in the last 20 years. And I'm going to get into the little backstory of why. But what are those foods? So I'm going to give you guys a list of some foods here to see if you guys can name them. And I started out pretty simple. So this first one that you have wrapped in corn husks is tamales. The second dish here is pico de gallo. So the difference between pico de gallo and salsa is that pico de gallo is cut up onion, cilantro, tomato, whereas salsa literally translates to sauce. It means that it's pureed. In this third picture over here, we have guacamole. Now, some people might be turned off a little bit by the color, but most are not. The consumption of avocados has gone up 400% since the early 2000s. I know that I never even saw guacamole as a teenager. Like I would have had no idea what it was. And now I eat it regularly. So it's really interesting to see that. This picture over here, this is a Spanish dish, paella. So this is specifically from Spain. It's got a rice foundation, a lot of times with different seafood or chicken, with your oysters and stuff like that. But paella is a Spanish dish. This next one is enchiladas. And our last one is churros y chocolate if you want a nice treat. So those are basically like donuts that you would dip in chocolate. So one of the things I like to talk to you about today is tacos. So I just mentioned how Taco Tuesday didn't exist for me 30 years ago when I graduated high school. But according to National Taco Day, Americans are eating billions of tacos every year, 4.5 billion to be more specific. So when I was growing up, the most popular food at a baseball game would have been a hot dog or a hamburger, and that was known as your quintessential American food, and not so much anymore. Americans not only love tacos, but they also love their Taco Bell. Around half of the US population visits a Taco Bell every 11 days. So are you one of those people? And if so, what do you like about Taco Bell? And I'm actually going to tell you a story about how Taco Bell has helped spread tacos in general. So in 1954, Glenn Bell started a burger chain in San Bernardino, California, but it wasn't very successful. It was a burger chain because he was next door to another burger joint owned by some brothers who were very, very successful. the McDonald brothers. And so he knew that he was going to have to change locations. And when he did, he moved into a Latin neighborhood. And across the street from him was a cafe called Meat La Cafe. And every single day, Glenn saw a long line out the door for lunch. And so one of those days he got in line, saw what everybody was ordering, ordered some tacos. He could not believe what he was tasting. It was amazing. So he started getting in line every single day with the purpose of trying to figure out what this recipe was. Well, the owner noticed what he was doing and sat him down and said, if you're going to take my recipe, I really want you to do it right, and handed over the Meat La Cafe taco recipe. And mind you, it was their grandmother's authentic recipe. And what I mean by authentic, it was what was authentic to them at the time. So when their grandma started making tacos for Meat La Cafe in the 1930s, they were coming out of the Depression era. And so she only had access to iceberg lettuce, meat, cheese, right? That classic taco that we so love. And so that was the recipe they gave to Glenn Bell. Glenn Bell took that recipe and opened up his own Taco Bell. And originally, when he first opened it up, he also still sold burgers, and it was an easy way to acclimate his customers from burgers than maybe trying what this taco was. So in 1954, this was the first stand that was opened by Glenn Bell. And by 2022, there's over 7,500 Taco Bells in the United States. And so before this, there wasn't a lot of places where you would have been able to go in and get a taco. So let's say in Middle Tennessee, all of a sudden a Taco Bell shows up. You haven't tried Mexican food before. You go in and you try a taco. So sure, it might not be the most authentic food, but it might be a gateway to you trying more authentic food because you've been introduced at a level of what Mexican food is. And so slowly, as more of these chain restaurants started to grow across the United States, people were introduced to more Mexican type food. And I think that is just really phenomenal. So the next time you visit Taco Bell, keep in mind that they had a huge role in introducing tacos to the United States. My favorite part about this whole story is that Meat La Cafe was recently interviewed. So they're the ones that their recipe was taken from, and said, are you upset that this man took your recipe and made millions of dollars off of it? And they said, no, because our objective as a restaurant in our community, it was never to be millionaires. Our objective was to have a successful family business within our community that also serves on a higher purpose, whether that's a gathering place, whether that's a place for families to meet on Sundays. And so Meat La Cafe had a huge presence during the civil rights movement, where this is where they all met in order to make the pool accessible to all people, when it was just accessible to whites before this. And so Meat La Cafe says, our purpose was to have a healthy generational restaurant where we can continue to pass this down. And now they're in their fourth generation. And so this is what I love about the American dream. It's different for everybody. So Meat La Cafe had a different view of what prosperity is for them compared to Glenn Bell, which is to make millions of dollars, and that's okay too. And so if you guys are interested, and I highly suggest this, I have put the video that I recently viewed that was on CBS Sunday Morning last year talking about the history of it. It's about 4 minutes long, so check that out. I've attached it underneath this lesson as well for you guys to watch this cultural lesson. Okay, so on to the vocabulario, but before we do vocab, let's practice some of our capitales that we were just introduced to. So, ¿cuál es la capital de Colombia? No problems at all if you have your cheat sheet in front of you. That is how you learn. You want to look at it. You want to repeat it. So hopefully by the end of the semester when I'm asking you these questions, you don't need to refer to your cheat sheet, but go ahead and feel free to do so. So la capital de Colombia es Bogotá. Muy bien. La capital de Honduras. Tegucigalpa. Las capitales de Bolivia. Hay dos capitales. La Paz y El Sucre. And so do any of you want to take a guess on what is the name of this road in Bolivia? It's called La Calle de Muerte, Death Road, because obviously there's no texting and driving. You have to be alert at all times. So La Calle de Muerte, that's called the Street of Death, Death Road. Más capitales, la capital de España, Madrid, la capital de Perú, Lima, y la capital de Uruguay, Montevideo. Excelente. All right, vamos a continuar ahorita con el capítulo 1, vocabulario. So remember, you guys can find this cheat sheet under module 1, and it's going to say chapter lesson. I don't know the number of the lesson, but it'll say chapter 1 vocab, and you will have all of this info right here. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I give you just the Spanish. You guys need to fill in the English. Also, these are all my own photos and videos that you guys are seeing of places that I have traveled to of Spanish-speaking countries. And here in this photo, we have a picture I took in Granada at the Alhambra, which is a 2,000-year-old palace. Okay, so here we're doing some greetings, some saludos. So remember, you guys, what I'm teaching you is just like your standard classic textbook Spanish. When you go out into the world, into the Spanish-speaking world, depending on where you go, you're going to get hit with all sorts of slang. And depending if you're in Puerto Rico or Mexico or Spain, they all speak differently. This is the most standard that will get you by no matter where you go. So, hola. In Spanish, they do not pronounce their H's when they're at the beginning of a sentence. Hola is hello. Buenos días, good morning. Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Buenas noches, good evening. Here we have two different ways to ask, how are you? One is asking in an informal way, and the other is asking in a formal way. So, ¿cómo estás? Is the informal way that you would ask a friend, someone that you're very casual with, how they are. ¿Cómo está usted? You would use in a more formal situation with a police officer, your boss, a doctor, your professor. Me, though, personally, I am very casual and you'd never have to use usted with me, but ¿cómo está usted? So there's two ways that you can navigate speaking in Spanish. One is in an informal situation, the other is a formal. Another informal way to say how are you is ¿qué tal? What's up? So again, I just gave you 3 examples, but I also know 10 more ways to ask somebody how they are doing. And so this is just the most standard that I am giving you. Ways that I can answer ¿cómo estás? Muy bien, bien, regular, no muy bien. So muy bien is very well, bien is well, regular is okay, no muy bien, not very well. So again, remember there's about 20 more responses to ¿cómo estás? I'm giving you the most basic, and we'll continue to add on. And depending on who you're talking to, you'll definitely learn more ways to respond about how well you are or not well you are doing. So usually after you ask somebody, ¿cómo estás? Estoy bien. ¿Y tú? And you. So that would be the informal way of asking somebody how they are. ¿Cómo está? Estoy bien. ¿Y usted? And you, formal. And so depending if you're an informal or formal, these both mean the same thing. So they both get you to where you're going. So also don't get hung up on like, oh man, I was supposed to use a formal and I used informal. In the beginning, when you're just learning, you're going to make all sorts of errors, and that's absolutely fine. 99% of the people you speak to will not be offended. Again, we have a formal and informal way to ask somebody's name. So, ¿cómo te llamas and cuál es tu nombre? Both mean what is your name. ¿Cómo se llama usted y cuál es su nombre? Both mean what is your name. The top 2 are informal. The bottom 2 are formal ways. So usually what I do, my general protocol, is to start with formal. And then if they give me permission by speaking in the to form. Like, for example, if I said to you, ¿Cómo se llama usted? And they said, Me llamo Bridget. ¿Y tú? They answered me back in the to informal. I would know that they do not need to be addressed as usted. That's usually how you tell. Okay. Ways that you can answer ¿Cómo está? Or ¿Cómo se llama? Or ¿Cómo te llamas? You can answer by saying Me llamo, mi nombre es, or soy. All three of these mean my name is. Me llamo Maria, mi nombre es Jose. Soy Maria Jose Fernanda. It's a matter of option and preference, which one you pick, and the one that you're most comfortable with. I use all three depending on la situación, the situation. Mucho gusto, nice to meet you. Encantado, it's a pleasure. Igualmente, likewise. And just as a reminder, not everything is directly translated, but it's translated to how we would say it in conversation in our culture. So encantado actually translates to enchanted. And some people might think it a bit odd if they said, Hi, I'm Maria. And I said, enchanted to meet you, Maria. So we translate it to how we speak, which would be, it's a pleasure to meet you, Maria. So that's why things don't always translate exactly. Okay. ¿De dónde eres? ¿De dónde es usted? So this is the way you would ask somebody where they are from. On the top, it's informal. On the bottom is formal. The answer is the same either way. Soy de Buffalo. Soy de los Estados Unidos. Soy de Madrid. Soy de Tegucigalpa. And notice, like, you could say yo soy, and I'll get into that once we start doing our subject pronouns, but in Spanish, your subject pronouns are optional. So whether you say yo soy or soy, it's the exact same. Adiós, hasta luego, hasta mañana. Just 3 ways to say goodbye, but there are definitely plenty more that I'm sure that you guys are familiar with. And hasta means until, so until later, until tomorrow. But we would translate it to see you tomorrow. Despedidas. Okay, so again, these are some other ways you could say goodbye. I gave you 3. You don't need to write these down. Hasta pronto, ciao, nos vemos, pura vida, tengo que irme. I probably use ciao the most. I use it a lot. So ciao is also Italian and French. In Italy, they use it for hi and bye. In Spain, they use it for goodbye. And in French, they use it for goodbye. So do most people in Europe. So I use ciao a lot. The other one that I love to use is pura vida. And this comes from a very specific country that we mentioned before, which is Costa Rica. What does the Terminator say? Hasta la vista. Hasta la vista, until we see each other. So, again, you guys remember pura vida means that we're all in this together. So I could say hola, you could say pura vida, I could say como estás, you could say pura vida, and that no matter what your current situation is, life for someone else can always be less fortunate. Just maybe, we should recognize that we're all here together and life is short, so start living it, pura vida. So remember, this is a Costa Rican phrase that means enjoy life, all good, purity in life, hello, and goodbye. Okay, continuando. So now we're en el salón de clase, in the classroom. We have el bolígrafo, which is pen, la computadora portátil. So remember, in Spanish, you pronounce every syllable. El cuaderno, el escritorio is desk, el cuaderno is folder. And the more you practice it out loud, the better your pronunciation is going to be, especially if you go over the top. You really got to go over the top to first get it. El lápiz is pencil, el libro de texto, textbook, la mesa, table, la mochila, backpack. El papel, paper. El pizarrón, chalkboard. La puerta, door. El reloj, watch. La silla, chair. La tarea, homework. El teléfono celular, cell phone. A lot of times you'll just hear people say el tele. La ventana, window. So now, if you guys turn over to your other side, we have the days of the week. Domingo, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado. So one of the things that's different about the Spanish language compared to the English is that they do not capitalize their days of the week. And so we always capitalize our days of the week and our months, and they do not do that in Spanish. Also, all the days of the week are named after planetas, planets. So lunes would be la luna, which would be the moon. Martes would be Tuesday, which is Mars. Miércoles, Mercury. Jueves, Jupiter. Viernes, Venus, muy bien, y sábado, Saturn. Okay, so right now we are doing your class materials and careers. So la estadística is statistics. La física is physics. La informática is technology. La ingeniería is engineering. I'm missing my eye there. Gotta fix that. Okay. And then on the next page, we go to lenguajes. We're doing languages. We have el español. Nosotros estamos en la clase de español. El francés. El chino. El japonés. So, ¿cómo se dice hola en francés? How do you say hello in French? Bonjour. ¿Cómo se dice hola en chino? Ni hao. ¿Cómo se dice hola en japonés? I think it's konnichiwa. All right, so el árabe is Arabic, excuse me. El italiano, Italian. El alemán, German. El inglés, English. Okay, and then we have las matemáticas, el periodismo, la química, la psicología. Okay, and one of the last things we're going to be doing is your personal pronouns and the verb ser, which we get into in our next lesson also. So yo is I, tú is you, usted is you, formal, él is he, ella is she. So remind you the double L is always like a Y, ella. Nosotros is we, vosotros is you, ustedes is you all. Ellos is they masculine. Ellas is they feminine. Soy, I am. Eres, you are. Es means is. Somos, we are. Sois, you all are. And son, they are. And ser means to be. Also, a star does. We're not going to get into that right now, but ser means to be, and so does a star. So if you were already a little bit confused, I'm sure that doesn't help. So one of the last things I'm going to leave you with is cognates, which are your friends. They are extremely helpful when it comes to Spanish. One of the best things about learning Spanish from English is that there are hundreds of words that you already know. As an English speaker, you have a huge advantage in learning Spanish compared to learning another language, such as someone being from Japan or China learning Spanish. You have the advantage of the same alphabet and a mile-long list of cognates. What this means is you effectively start learning Spanish with a vocab of about 1,000 words without even trying. So if you guys look at your cheat sheet, you guys will see this. When you find words that are the same in both languages, they are referred to English-Spanish cognates. The proper definition of a cognate is reserved for words that exist in two different languages and have the same root or origin. Since Spanish and English both have Latin roots, there are heaps of words that are the same. So obviously they are not pronounced the same as in English, but you have the rules down for Spanish pronunciation. So you just pronounce every syllable. So just to give you an example, right? I'm giving, these words are in Spanish, error, but looking at it, maybe if you heard me say it to me, oh, es un error. You're like, I have no idea. But if you looked at the written, you'd be like, oh, that definitely means error. Mapa, map. Irónico, ironic. And so you guys have 1,000 words already that you are familiar with. Médico, medic. Público, public. Romántico, romantic. Plástico, plastic. Religioso, religious. Okay, but there are some false cognates, meaning that these are words that you want to translate into English, like you know what it means. If I see éxito, I'm like, oh yeah, that definitely means exit. But try to think of an exit sign. What does it usually say on it in Spanish? It says salida. So éxito, this is a false cognate. Success. Embarazada. Ay, Dios mío, estoy muy embarazada. I've said that before when I thought, oh my gosh, I am so embarrassed. I said to my Mexican homestay family, I said, estoy super embarazada. I'm really embarrassed. But actually I said, I'm really pregnant. And you can imagine how horrified they were as they looked at my 16-year-old self sitting at the table. And so for me, having a sense of humor and learning a language always go hand in hand. You have to be able to laugh at yourself. Fábrica looks like fabric and it means factory. And actually sopa, this one's not really helpful because sopa means soup, but you also might think it means soap. And so this is not the best example, but sopa means soup, does not mean soap. So hopefully that gives you a general idea of what some false cognates are, and that we're going to make it before the 30-minute mark. Que tenga buen día. If you guys have any questions, I know there was a lot, but remember it's a journey that you're on with practice and dedication and that growth mindset. You will get to where you are going. Please reach out via email if you have fallen behind, if you have questions, or you need assistance. I look forward to hearing from you. So, nos vemos pronto y que tenga buen día. Chao.